Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Laura Wright Jones, and I am very happy to be here with you today with my colleague James. Um, J James, I completely blanked on your last name, but we'll just call him James. We'll call him James K. James K is here with us, ladies and gentlemen. Anyway, so we're so glad that you're here with us to just learn more about Cricut Media and our DAL and how we license content and just the pure excitement that is Cricut Media content. James is in charge of our DAL or our library, and so he's the best person to tell you about it. And so many of you talk to like me or my colleague Jamie or my other colleague Linda when we're talking about license. Very few of you get behind the scenes access like you're about to get with James. So he put a wonderful presentation together for you. I'm going to step back. It's going to be super conversational, but I'm going to let James take it from here.
Hey, thank you. I'm very happy and excited to tell you about Cricut Media DAL for licensing, your custom experience. And I see we have a lot of people on this webinar, so I hope everyone is safe and well today. As Laura Wright Jones almost told you, I'm James Kenley. I'm Director of Digital Asset Management Services for Cricut Media. And I've spent this century in content creation, content management, and project management in educational software and publishing. So full-time positions with Renaissance Learning, Power Schools, Core Knowledge Foundation, and contractor work with many other firms before coming to Cricut Media. So I know the day-to-day of educational software and publishing, and I've been in your shoes. I've had to make the same kinds of decisions about content and about licensing that you folks are making. So I hope I can give some insights from both chairs. Megan is with us, and Megan is going to be watching the chat and Q&A. And Megan, if you don't mind, just hop on in with anything that you think is relevant, and we might ask that we put a pin in some stuff because we're going to get to it, or we might just shift direction. As Laura Wright Jones said, it's very conversational today, and we're just going to take you through who we are, where we're from, and the digital asset library for licensing. It's just a little context on why we and our valued licensing partners are so excited about the DAL for licensing. So,
This is James, this is my favorite part. I hate to interrupt because everybody I talk to knows Cricut, and a lot of that knowledge comes from when we were in elementary school because we've been around so long. Cricut has been a staple in American classrooms for decades, and it is so exciting to be able to offer this content out to people who are building curriculum and building assessment. We all know it because it helped us learn.
and a lot of us don't know all of the different facets of the company. Let me start with a just sort of a boilerplate statement about Cricut Media for those of us who aren't really familiar with it. But we're Cricut Media, a global education company creating high quality print and online learning products for children, adult mentors, families, teachers, and partners in education and licensing. So with our product lines led by our 9 award-winning children's magazines and our customizable collaborative learning programs, including language learning, e-mentoring platforms, we're committed to creating safe and supportive learning innovations. So just talking about some of the areas here in terms of publishing, the print magazines don't just feed the DAL, though digital text and audio are growing faster. More than 2/3 of US parents strongly prefer print for educational reading, and print is highly valued in China. So it's doing well for us, and we're, the demise of print is a little bit premature, those rumors, right? So in terms of licensing, now the licensing is and continues to be a force in the Cricket Media Holdings DAM strategy. It's been one of the main engines for getting 100,000 plus assets uploaded. And I do want to mention here that our hosting Time for Kids and other content is very important to us. Although most of what I'm going to be talking about today is specific to Cricket Media when it comes to looking through the DAL and some of our search strategies. It also applies generally to other partner content as well. Our online learning Cricket Media digital asset library is the content source of truth and the research hub for all of our learning platforms. And there are huge possibilities for the near future. We're just starting to really tap into the power of the digital asset library in terms of platform products and global distribution. New Pals, our wholly owned China subsidiary, and other sibling companies in Cricket Media Holdings have used the digital asset library to feed multiple channels. An example of these areas, how this all kind of works together, is that hosting Time for Kids content in our digital asset library opened the door. And now we're the publisher for Time for Kids in China, in English and in Chinese, in print and digital formats for the home and school markets under a multi-year license. And Time for Kids content is also to be licensed to developers of educational products in China. So on top of that, we already publish a Chinese version of Click, a discovery magazine for ages 3 to 6, and disaggregated assets from Click Chinese and Cricket World of Wonder, a newer Chinese magazine, are available in the DAL. So that's part of where we live in terms of our larger business model that really helps benefit licensing for the DAL. I want to talk a little bit too about where we're from. And I think Laura Wright Jones might have to hold me back a little bit because this is, to me, some of the most fascinating parts. As she mentioned, we've been around for a long, long time, starting in the 1880s with Open Court Publishing, and the Karras family carried us all through the beginnings of our educational products in the 1960s with Open Court Reading. This is one of the first commercially available phonics programs. And I know there are a lot of people on this call who know a lot more about this than I do. So I'm not going to get into any of the various pedagogical arguments for or against Open Court and its legacy. But here's an interesting thing. All of our magazines grew out of Open Court. 1973 brought volume 1, number 1 of Cricket magazine. And that issue and the next 35 years issues of that magazine were edited by Marianne Karras, who passed away in 2021. And, the first issue was a who's who of children's literature. And the issues that followed included a long list of Caldecott and Newbery Award winners and much, much more. And the Karras organization started or acquired other top quality magazines, and we all benefit from that. One example is Cobblestone magazine, the children's American history magazine in the DAL. I can pull up almost 20 years worth of licensable articles by historian Heather Cox Richardson, the author of the popular current affairs blogs, Letters from an American. And I read that every morning. It's some people go for the stock ticker and some people go for their box scores. I read Letters from an American, and it's a little bit of a thrill every time I go into the DAL to search his content. But her work is just one example of the high quality, relevant, authentic, real world content Cricket offers. Now, it's not to scale, but if we look up here, the history of the digital asset library is really a very small part of this. We created the DAL in 2014 largely to meet licensing demand. And even though the DAL serves multiple functions, as we've just talked about, we've been thinking of our valued licensing partners the whole time. And the current sales team still helps to shape our digital direction. So again, I could spend the day here because all of these three facets of this history actually brought me to cricket. My kids were cricketers. We switched from another magazine to cricket products when they were little. I worked in Charlottesville for a uh, sort of an educational think tank that had deep ties to open court and to bloke Karras. And, open court, Paul Karras, a story that he wrote in the 1890s. I read a different version of it in Japanese in the 1990s that kind of changed my life. And I didn't know until during the pandemic, when I was digging into some open court stuff for licensing, that he was the original author. So this
James,
is a big part.
there's so much good stuff here that I
So
I know we could spend the whole day right here talking about the great and wonderful content that's in our DAO. Let's get to it. We want to see the DAO. Let's move, move, move.
let's keep moving. See, I told you were going to have to do that.
It's my job.
But, you know, we've got in the DAL 100,000 assets from Cricket Media and Time for Kids and others. We've got evergreen content, some back to 1980, and tagging across multiple dimensions of metadata for successful queries. So we've got powerful and flexible query mechanics that we're going to look at in just a minute, and simple and attractive layout for passage searchers. Our dashboards and collections for easy communication with users by role. And I think at that point, I just want to take a look at a few slides to tell you how some of our licensing partner have used this content. The current lineup of our flagship products, the highest quality English language magazines, the 9 titles here in literature and imagination, in history and culture, and discovery, and there are a dozen more legacy titles in the library. So it's a wealth of evergreen content. And you don't need to take notes of this, by the way, as it's all available in the library. In terms of the tagging for Lexile ranges and the age ranges of the magazines, again, there's no need to take notes because the library has a persistent source for all this. Main assets have valid Lexile scores via the metametrics process. One exception is Baby Bug, our magazine for children 6 months to 3 years, because that magazine is written for caregivers to read aloud, and Lexile scoring for those assets would not be useful. But there's a wide variation of content and content formulas or formats within each issue. So one great trick of searching ranges of magazines constrained by Lexile bands will show you just a few minutes in the hands-on. Literature study for our literature and imagination titles. Here are just some of the uses in curriculum or assessment. And a lot of what I will be showing you in the coming slides is just sort of baked into our content. It's kind of what we do. So multiple opportunities for genre exploration, fiction, poems, science fiction, riddles, experiments, vocab building based on selected themes. And I'm really happy that the education team focused on this asset, as I've borrowed some slides from one of their decks. But it's one of my favorites. It's a great exploration of identity that gives opportunities for exploring literary elements, asking questions, making inferences, connections within the text and outside the text, and diversity in the content. Now, we'll talk again about tagging for diversity in detail when we get to the library in just a few more slides. Informational text study, we have shorter articles, a great variation in length of text and levels that provide ideal resources for preview and prediction, main idea supporting details, citing text evidence, etc. These are really so many of the functions that we're looking for when we talk about the Common Core state standards, among others. Laura, do you have any input on what your
Yeah,
licensing partners generally look for in
yeah.
informational text study and how this applies?
Well, you bet. Like just looking at the slide, this is what our partners are looking for, particularly when it comes to these shorter articles, the informational text, and the way that so much of our content aligns with those common core needs in the assessment and curriculum development. I always say that, the Cricut DAL is your one-stop shop. You do not have to run around to a bunch of different publishers because we've got mostly everything you need right in one easy to use library. And when I say easy to use, I can use it and find stuff. And if I can do that, I'm telling you, anybody can. But the best part of the presentation is coming up because James is going to show us the tips and tricks that we all need in order to get the most out of our time inside the DAO.
Absolutely. Do want to mention a couple of other facets of the content before we go in. Our STEM focused articles meet instructional requirements of next gen science standards. These are stimuli, not exercises or curricular learning units. So they're not aligned as such, but they reflect real world issues and problems. Really, if your product requires any level of building toward project-based learning, we're a very good source. And we also have great historical and cultural content supporting the C3 framework. The Cricut Magazine teacher guides are another huge source. And Laura was asking earlier when we were talking about this, are these licensable? Absolutely. The content going well back into our DAL is covered by teachers and consultants who have, over the years, examined this content, built questions, built leading exercises for the content, and much of the bulk of the teacher guides are not available on our website, even though the new ones are every month. But we have older teacher guides for our legacy titles and others going back, as we say, 3,000 deep. Again, ready to go standards aligned lessons and exercises
So
that
these
are
teacher
available to you.
these teacher guides, they're like a hidden gem, and most people who use our DAO probably don't even know about them. So those of you that are on this, you're getting, as I said, kind of that behind the scenes information that isn't readily available. Teachers guides are a wealth of information, already curated curriculum, and they are things that you can license and use as is or adapt to your needs. Pretty cool stuff.
And this is why it's so helpful to have two of us on here, because not only will Laura Wright restrain me when I take you into a history tour back to the 1880s, which I'm grateful. I'm not even kidding. But she'll also tell me this because I'm up to my hip in this stuff every day. I don't know what our licensing users don't know because uh, in general, once Laura Wright takes them through training, they are self-sufficient and very happy to go through the dam. But
Those are Linda's customers that are self-sufficient.
okay. So here's where Laura says she likes to start, and this is where I like to start too, is when I'm training a new dam librarian, this is where I start. Um, I'll show you in just a minute how to get to this document. It's just a PDF. And I think probably what we should start with, Laura, is actually how to download and print this PDF, right? Be
Absolutely. This is the most important thing, in my opinion, that you start with. If you have this, you have it all.
yeah. And just the left rail of this, the leftmost column, the three-letter code is the key to all kinds of content in the dam. And knowing in one place, being able to see our current and our legacy publications. I say DAM and DAL interchangeably, excuse me if I do. We're really just all talking about the digital asset library here. But once you've got this, as Laura says, you've got the key. So are we ready, do you think, to jump in?
I've been ready to jump in since 4 slides ago, and I know that our folks are. So let's see what this demo is about.
Okay. So this is an account I've set up, a test account that's really like what most people will have coming in. And just to start with, here's that content map. Here's a link to that. The video you don't really need, but the content map is just a PDF. And when you've got this PDF up, you can do it a couple of different ways. What I would do at this point, if I've clicked on it and I have it here in the quick view, I would select it and I would download. This download end user license agreement is the exact same end user license agreement that you agree to when you start your account with the dam in the digital asset library. And it just really says that you agree not to use the content for anything outside of your licensing agreement with Cricket Media. So it's very straightforward. I agree. No, really, I keep on agreeing. There we go.
I think one of the best things about this document is that it lists so many our legacy magazines, right? So not just our flagships that we publish today, but the magazines that we've published in the past that you might not know anything about. We have like the Teacher's Guide is a secret gem, so are publications like Footsteps.
Mm-hmm.
These are gems that you're not going to find anywhere else, that
Mm-hmm.
most people don't even know we're here. So this document is going to give you that short synopsis of what's in here, what our magazines are about, and what grades and ages they cover.
Yes. Now, uh, Laura Wright was telling me, and I know this is to be true, that the sales directors are always watching for notifications that someone needs approval for a download. And it usually happens within an hour. One thing that is good to note, and we'll show you how to do it in just a second. You don't have to download just one asset at a time. If you've got groups of assets you would like to look at, you can do it that way as well. But Laura, do you want to explain the process of how that works and how folks get their downloads?
Sure. Once you request a download, it's going to generate an automatic email. That email is going to come to me, or it's going to come to Jamie, or it's going to come to Linda, and whoever your sales director is. And we're going to get a notification. And generally, all of us are really good about jumping right in there and approving it. It's just kind of a layer of security for us to make sure that the right people are downloading stuff, and we're not giving our content to just anybody. But once we say we approve the download, then you're going to get another email that says your download's been approved. It's got a link in it. You just click the link. It's going to take you right there, and then you're going to be able to download your material. But what's really important to understand about the process is that say you request something late on Friday afternoon, and for some weird reason, I actually get to it on a late Friday afternoon, which is rare, and I approve it, and then it sits there over the weekend, and maybe you remember on Tuesday that you requested a download, and by the time you get back in there, it says your download has expired. You're going to have to go back in and re-request those pieces, because we on our end cannot recreate your request. So all of that being said, if your request expires before you download it, you're just going to have to re-request it, and that's completely fine.
Another thing to note is that the word order does not indicate any financial responsibility at this point.
Just because you download it does not mean you licensed it.
Exactly. So, and that's all explained, of course, in the end user license agreement, but it is in and of itself not any financial responsibility to Cricut Media. You're just shopping right now. And Laura Wright will help you with the actual agreement. So let's say I like these guest samplers. These are really just to help balance in terms of diversity in your content, and they just give some ideas of some things that can be used. Now, as I go through these, I might see here a couple of assets from the same issue. This is FAC 1707. That means that's Faces 2017, July. Okay, so from that issue, I see a couple of things already that I'm interested in. How do I know I'm interested in them? I look at the quick view. I scan the metadata. I scan the content itself. I decide this is something that fits my project's needs. A couple of things I can do right now. I can select both of these, add them to a collection. I'm going to add it to a new collection called Diverse 24. I don't need a description for it. I know what it is. And those are waiting for me later.
And James, can't you correct me if I'm wrong? I honestly don't know the answer to this question, which means I'll confuse people, but can I share collections with my colleagues who also have access?
You can, and that would be by email. It's not something that we do so often, but sharing those collections works the same way.
Oh, awesome. That's super easy. I see that.
Share via email, share as collection. And it's as straightforward as you would imagine it to be. One thing that you'll note is that after I got out of that, those were no longer selected. But let's say I decide this Spider November 2016 asset is something else I want. But I'm looking in other places. I look for other types of assets. I even do other searches that remain selected. So here's one thing to note is that this has a persistent selection memory until I do something major, right? All of these assets are a cumulative selection until I either put them into a collection or download them, right? So that's just something to note, that you can go on and do multiple searches, multiple searches really is the best way to put it, until you do something major with those. That selection will roll along with you through different kinds of searches. Now, when I go back to this though, faces, July 2017, I want to see what else is in that magazine. And this is why this is the first place where that map is more important. I've already read, as Laura Wright Jones recommended, to see all of the publications on that menu. I've looked at the age ranges. I know what they're about. I've found some hidden gems in Cricket's legacy content, but now I'm using our basic file naming structure to help search. And when I get here, this is great, 38 assets that are along the lines of what I want to see. I tell you what, because I know the RTFs and the JPEGs are all derived from the PDF, just to make my own life easier, I'm going to start delimiting here. Okay, so I've delimited by PDF. That takes 38 down to 17. And I realize, among these content types, I'm not as interested in recipes and puzzles for this particular project as I am in articles. And that brings me down to 9. Nonfiction, autobiography. This is actually something I want to focus in on, which brings me back to actually the first asset I started with that first caught my attention in that collection. But that's okay, because I can back out and take a look at other things. I can actually decide, you know what, I'm really interested just in this genre of nonfiction, of autobiography and biography, to see what Cricket has along those lines. I'll
You,
go and
James, I love how we can drill down using the metadata on the left-hand slider.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Um, but I think would be super useful is if we could jump back to the very first page. Like when I log in, the page that I see, my instinct is to go up to that search bar and start my search. That's,
Absolutely.
I'm a Google kid. Does this work like Google?
It does not. It
Ah,
is, well, here's the thing. Yes, in that it's an elastic search, right?
how did you
But
get to this page right here? Can you show that again?
you mean by clicking on the Cricket
So if I click on the
logo
Cricut,
from any page? Yeah,
so is that logo going to bring me back to my landing page?
every time.
Can you click it real quick for me?
It's going to redraw because that's where I am.
And then how did you get to the next page? Oh, you clicked on the magnifying glass.
Right.
Okay, I
So
didn't see that part.
well,
So click on the magnifying glass and then that brings up all the assets, right?
mhm.
Gotcha.
So one of the things that I was interested in, and where we can go here, in that previous search, I was actually caught by nonfiction genre, autobiography, and biography. And I can go by any of these metadata facets and start narrowing down in that genre. One of the things that we see, that I see as I'm going through is that an overwhelming number of licensees start with this. It's a little surprising, but the second group by number of searches that I see actually goes straight to a magazine like Cobb September 2024, for example, that COB 2409. So people knowing exactly what issue they want to go to is another big grouping. One of the things that comes after that actually is searching by topic. So I can actually go down, for example, as Laura was saying, I can click on the magnifying glass and start narrowing down, right? And let's finish that before we go to searching by topics and terms. But for example, here we have the categories of assets, the magazine assets, ebook assets, training and governance. There are three of those, one of which is that digital asset library menu of magazines. There are time for kids assets and two more third-party content asset groups. If I just want to focus on Cricket Media magazine assets, that's where I start. And I can back out of that and choose any other. As we've seen, the content types like article, game, historical, index, poem, puzzle, etc. One of these that Laura was very excited about, and I am too, is the resources teacher guides. That is its own content type that you can select. And of course, when you put in a magazine code, for example, ask May 24, ask 2405, that teacher guide is going to come up with that group of assets. So you can use these to narrow down your search, including going by Lexile measures, the high and low, the page count, whatever you want to do, including ranges of publication date. And this is, Laura, your question, is this like Google? No, it's a lot more like Amazon, right? You start with a wider search and you narrow your search as you go. But it's really a query, and it doesn't have the persistent memory of a Google type search engine. So does that answer your question? And is that really the kind of information that's useful to start with in terms of all of the metadata categories that appear on the left rail?
Yeah, so it certainly answers my question. And of course, I knew the answer already. But the reason why I asked it is because when people are new to the library and they see that search bar, automatically think Google, and it doesn't exactly work that way. But James has some tips and tricks to get the most out of that search bar, and he's going to share those with you right now.
Yeah, and here's the thing. Because it is not Google, it doesn't know how to search, how to serve up. When I search for Martin Luther King, it's going to give me everything with those three words. So after a few pages of this 494 assets, I'm going to start hitting assets about the Protestant Reformation. because it has Martin Luther and the word king. So in order to get around that, there are a couple of different ways to delimit this so that I'm really looking for the assets that I want. And a lot of that comes to search help. Search help is just like this Cricut logo, it's always there. It never goes away. You don't have to memorize it. You don't have to take notes because you can always go here. And let's say I want to know a a field that's going to help me limit this. How about title? Great. I want to know in the title Martin Luther King. And I just want to look at assets that have in the title Martin Luther King, because I think that's one great way to determine that I'm only getting assets that are about Martin Luther King. So perfect. That's even a little bit too narrow, though, isn't it? So I can go with keywords. Now, keyword here, a note, keywords over here on the left where it says search within, that actually is a misnomer, and that's built into this platform. That actually searches all index fields. But if I go to search help and I know, along with all of this information about building complex Boolean search strings, which is fun for some of us, not so fun for everybody. Everybody does it differently. I see that that field is actually called keyword CSV and the short code is KC. Boom. KC is all I need to know. What this does is gives me 66 assets that are specifically tagged Martin Luther King. That means that some editor has decided that that is really the topic of this asset. And if I want to go a little deeper or a little bit in a slightly different direction, rather, that'll give me everything that's keyworded Martin Luther King, but contains the word in some of its index fields, whether that's the text itself, a title, or other, the word influence. So I will, for example, here come up with Coretta Scott King, and James Meredith is also part of this asset. It's a 2-page folder, and others from the older civil rights movement. I see W.E.B. Du Bois there, who were influences on the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. So that's one way to work around or work with the DAM to start identifying assets by their themes and topics.
You know, James, we have so much information that we could share with the participants today, but unfortunately, we're running down to the last quarter of the hour. And
mm,
so what I wanted to say, what I wanted to ask you was, you know, we do have teams of people. I work with teams of people at different publishers, and sometimes I will do trainings with those teams all together. Um, but let's say I had a team that wanted to like really deep dive into these keywords and the stuff we're talking about today. Um, you and I were talking about this. Cricut can offer that to a team. If you have a team that you would really like a deep dive demo, James and I can work together to get that coordinated for you and your team. So don't feel like this is your only opportunity for a deep dive into this digital asset library, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we really want to be here to make sure that you get the most out of this content because as you can see, it's vast and it covers just so many of the needs that you are telling me that you're looking for. Um, one of the questions that came up, I saw it kind of pop up in the questions and answers or chat or something, and I've been asked it recently and I actually did a whole demo recently on our Spanish content. But do we have content in other languages?
Absolutely.
Can you show us some of that?
Yep. Let's see.
It's super
Couple of
easy to
different
get
ways to
to.
get to it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's super easy. I think that you can get it just the way that I do it, and I always go the easiest way is I just drill down using all that metadata on the side.
you can. Um, Obviously, the Cricut assets and the Time for Kids assets. Let's see. No, I think we did it. Let me just do Chinese because at this point, we really only have simplified, don't have a lot of traditional.
Yes, that's a lot of Chinese content. I mean, that's a very specialized need. And so if you know anybody or you're somebody who maybe needs some Chinese content, bet you didn't know you could come to Cricut to get it, but you can. Beautiful.
So it's really just a second here to talk about some of the leaps and bounds we're about to make in terms of tagging. You know, we have keyworded and written abstracts for as much of the content as we can with our short little lives and our short little fingers. But we're really on the verge of some whole different levels of tagging for our content. And we just want to say, keep your eyes open, you know, this bat place, this bat channel, this bat time, we will have some interesting news pretty soon.
We are always trying to make it easier for you to find the content that you need in the Cricut Media Library for sure. One of the things we promised we would do at the end is kind of leave space for questions. And I think we do have a couple. Megan's in charge of everything here. She's behind the scenes running the show. So Megan, what do we have questions?
Sure. So the lovely thing is, I think several of these questions were kind of addressed as they came up, but if I bring up yours now and you have further elaboration on it, please feel free to add to it in the chat or the Q&A. Uh, so Lindsay Vanderberg did ask, can you explain how to search by themes or by standards that can be taught with the text? I know we did go over how you can search by topic.
Mm-hmm.
But is there any further elaboration on specifically standards that can be taught with the text?
Well, that would be in the teacher guides. And, you know, the thing is, these would be stimuli, and any uh, learning object that you created out of these stimuli would be alignable to a standard, a state or agency standard. And I used to do that for Renaissance Learning and for Power Schools. So I actually know a good bit about assessment and alignment, but these are not. If you wanted to look into the teacher guides, you'll start to see how the teacher guides are organized with activities by standard. And that's where you'd find the only objects in the digital asset library that we would really tag as such, but, or excuse me, that we would um, align. But let's see. A lot of these are really just about concepts and skill focuses. And at this point, not standards aligned as I can see. Some of the older teacher guides were expressly aligned to state standards and, or excuse me, to Common Core. And these, it looks like, are not. So take a note of that, Megan, if you will, and I'll actually get back to how to find those that are aligned.
Okay, and Lindsay, please feel free to communicate with us live over the chat or in the Q&A if you have any follow-up on that question as well. I also saw another question about difficulty accessing something. So if that's still an issue, let us know about that too.
I think I saw that one, Megan. I think it was she couldn't get into the, for some reason, when she tried to get to the content map, it said she didn't have access. And I honestly cannot think of any reason why she would not. Oh, she says she has it now. Never mind. It's all fixed. We fixed it.
All right.
We'll take credit for fixing it, although we did nothing, but.
But yeah, wonderfully, the other questions so far all kind of came up in the conversation organically, such as how do you search to get to the various screens, and the question about do we have a collection in Spanish. But if there are any other questions, please feel free to ask now. Now is a fantastic time for that.
And while you're thinking about any last minute questions, I'm just going to throw out a couple of things that come up sometimes when I'm talking to folks who use our content. When James was talking about searching specific magazine issues, the reason why that comes up is because our issues are themed. So if you find one thing in an issue that works for you, chances are you're going to find more than one thing that works for your project. If you have a physical magazine that you're looking at and you find an article and you're like, oh my gosh, this, I absolutely want to use this, and you go into our library and you can't find it, that probably means that we are not able to license it to you. It's important for you to have that information, that occasionally there are going to be articles that we cannot license, and those articles are not going to be in the library. So that's a really good indicator that it's not available. But I know that for myself, and I'm sure my counterparts, feel free to reach out to me with any questions about what is and isn't licensable, and we'll be happy to check on it for you. The other thing is with the Time for Kids content, that happens a lot, is people will find something that they want to use, and they can't find a Time for Kids article in our library. Please reach out to your sales director about that, because we can normally get it uploaded for you.
And honestly, that goes with the Cricut content as well, because before, say, 2004, the uploads that we have are spottier for some magazines just because of old formats. You know, we've got zip disks, we've got old Quark files and so forth that we just really don't have digital assets for yet. We haven't scanned the full 50 years.
Yeah, so if you find something out in the wild and you can't find it in our library, reach out to your sales director and they'll try to track it down or at least get an answer for you.
Right, because the text might well be licensable, and even the production files, even the high resolution art may be available in the vault, and I can pull it out, but it's just not represented in the DAM yet.
For sure, for sure. I will say that we'll probably individually, Linda and Jamie and I will be reaching out to all the participants and folks that signed up individually. So you can expect follow-up from your sales director with any specific questions that you might have. If there are people on your team that need access to this library, if you yourself do not have access to this library, please let your sales director know. They'd be happy to get you set up and get you a quick walkthrough so that you can start finding what you need for your projects. All right, James, we've got 2 minutes. Anything else?
You know, really at this point, I would just suggest that if there is ever any question about how to search or any question about turning up assets, we can run quick searches and not only send you a list of the assets that you could put into the multiple asset search. You know, we really just send you a list of file names, you put them in here and get those up in a single search. We can do that, but we'll also send you the text search, the search string itself, so that not only you could save that and learn from it, or, you know, we can do a little bit of our own debrief and figure out why you couldn't find the asset. I know that's not the preferred way of this thing, but we want to help you in any way we can. And if that means saying, oh, okay, we could have tagged that in a different way to make it available for you, we are certainly happy to do the work and dig down and find it.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, communication is king. We are a very small team and we work together every day. And our goal is to just make sure that you, the folks who license our content and use it in your great curriculum and assessment, are able to find what you need. So we will help you in any way that we can. We're absolutely humbled that you took an hour out of your day to look at Cricut today. I'm always humbled by people spending their time with us and our precious magazines. So thank you all so much for being here. Please direct any questions that have come up that haven't been answered to your sales director, to me, whatever. We'll make sure that they get answered. And that's the thank you slide, which means that the webinar is over.
Thank you very much for spending your time with us.
Bye, everybody.